Archives. This includes DPMO, JPAC, U.S. Air Force Historical Research Agency, Army Human Resources Command, and a number of other repositories that include relevant information. I think this range of entities reflects the range of entities of the U.S. government who contemporaneously and subsequently attempted to document what happened in a lost case and the efforts to recover the remains in such a case. These go from records of the unit to which the individual belonged, casualty notification offices, to graves registration teams, and so on. These include organizations in the overseas theater of operations as well as the Washington policy level. And many records of such organizations that potentially are of interest have been accessioned by the National Archives. These records were described in 1997 in a reference information paper produced by the National Archives. Records relating to American prisoners of war and missing in action personnel from the Korean War and during the Cold War. I brought about 100 copies of this reference information paper today. There's about a half a dozen on the front table, and there's 2 tables just outside the ballroom that include probably 50 items on each. The compiler, interestingly, of this reference information paper is named Tim Werkamp, and he had a personal interest in this subject because his father was a World War II POW who was captured in the Philippines in 1942 by the Japanese and was released in 1945 and after being held in Wuhan, Manchuria. This reference information paper describes over 100 series of records where there is information about POWs and MIAs from this period. Most of the records identified in here, however, do not contain a lot of information about specific individuals. There's lots of reference to policy papers, to the changing lists of who was in one casualty status or another, and policy documentation behind why such changes often were made. When contemplating doing research in archival records, it's good to keep a few things in mind. First of all, we, that is the National Archives, respect the original provenance of the records and keep the permanently valuable records we accession in the same way that the entity that created the records did. So researchers interested in a particular topic need to examine multiple series of records, often created by multiple offices and arranged in a variety of ways in an attempt to locate what is pertinent to their particular research interest. One caveat about my previous statement that we don't have a lot of information about specific individuals. We do have some sort of dossiers of debriefings of almost all released U.S. POWs from the Korean War period. There's about 250 Air Force preliminary interrogations. These are fairly short, 3 to 4 pages at the most. They're declassified recently and they're available for research. For Navy and Marine Corps POWs, there were only several hundred Navy and Marine Corps POWs during the Korean War. These include the multiple questionnaires and debriefings for each of the returned POWs. These are very large dossiers. They have been declassified and they've been reviewed for privacy issues. They're entirely available for public research. We also have about 700 boxes of Army Korean War POW dossiers. Most of these also recently have been declassified. There's a small segment of them that have not yet been declassified. There are about a third of them have been reviewed for privacy issues. We screen the others on demand, and they're generally very available. But again, as previous presenters have indicated, POW dossiers are often a good source of information about the missing. Staff at the National Archives have been working in support of POW and MIA research for at least 30 years. And as you heard previously, and I can attest, DPMO and JPAC researchers are at National Archives at College Park every day. There's at least 2 or 3 people from those 2 organizations going through archival records, which are often the beginning place of trying to resolve some of the issues that we're trying to resolve. Over the years, our staff has brought to the attention of DPMO and JPAC records that we recently uncovered that include the sort of information that they're looking for in terms of their research. With regard to all sorts of topics, people often ask the question, do you have any records relating to, and then fill in the blank, and the answer often is, we don't know, nobody's asked that question before. So we are dependent on you for asking us questions, and which will allow us to attempt to locate documentation that will assist your research. As I said, I've given contact information for you if you want to write to us or contact us from off-site, or we welcome you to come to the archives to do research as well. But archival research is a very labor-intensive process and very slow. There are a few shortcuts. Almost all research involves turning pages. For the most part, records in the National Archives are not available online. The question then is, what could you hope to achieve by doing archival research and records at the National Archives? I'd suggest that we could be of most assistance to you in learning more about the circumstances surrounding your lost incident. Alternately, you could compile a history of the entire time that your individual was in the war zone. You could use textual records, which my unit surfaces, but there are also maps, photographs, and perhaps even motion pictures. I participated with a briefing of several of the senior leadership at JPAC and DPMO earlier this week out at College Park that several of the DPMO and JPAC researchers on site there conducted. I was really impressed with some of the neat stuff they do using aerial footage and maps to identify areas where there might be remains left behind. Most of the focus of the discussions on Tuesday were World War II types of issues, but textual records are not the only source that can be useful in this sort of research. A few administrative points. The records of interest to you, given the period that you're interested in, are maintained at Archives 2 in College Park, Maryland, or on the northernmost part of the University of Maryland campus. These records can be reviewed by anyone 16 years of age or older. We're open Monday to Saturday, 9 to 5. There's no fee for using our records, nor is there a fee for parking. Inasmuch as copies are using the self-service copiers in our research room are 25 cents a page, you might consider bringing a digital camera or your own scanner. Thank you for your attention. I welcome your questions. The reference staff at the National Archives will be glad to attempt to assist you. And by all means, please take a look at RIP 102, which relates to records in the National Archives relating to the issue in which you all are interested. Thank you.
Okay, while the microphone's going around, Tim mentioned before the mad rush on Tim, like it was last year.
Or what?
sent the book last year, scanned it in, and we got it on our website. So it's available at the TKMO website. You get a PDF version of this, so you don't have a hard copy when you get to hang in your bookshelf. You go to the TKMO website and see it as well. So I promised that last year, we did that. We're going to open up the floor right now to questions. Right here.
Okay, this is a question for both of y'all, and I'm just kind of curious, you know, where are y'all, or are you even looking into, in the future, digitizing these records, digitizing the personnel records in St. Louis, all the stuff that is on microfiche? I mean, I know that that is a massive, time-consuming, and expensive project, but is that in the works? Is that something that will be happening down the line, or?
Yes, I can answer that. Spoke with the archivist in St. Louis, National Personnel Records Center. They claim on hard copy documents that they're not going to digitalize that, they're going to leave it in the original form. However, on morning reports, unit rosters, the hospital reports, passenger list reports, that is on microfiche right now.
The National Archives has digitized some of our records. We've also worked in partnership with other organizations, principally genealogical groups, where they have digitized some of our records. When one of our partners digitizes records, those records are available for a fee through the partner's website, but they're also available at the same time at any National Archives facility throughout the United States, and there are regional archives. There are 11 or 12 presidential libraries, which are part of the National Archives and Records Administration. If records are not born digital, and they're of remarkable quality, it's very expensive to digitize them because of the processing necessary to make it happen. You have to remove staples, you have to remove all sorts of other fasteners before you can run stuff through a scanner. So the amount of our holdings, particularly as I mentioned when we're talking about 1.7 million cubic feet of records, the percentage of our holdings that ultimately will ever be digitized and made available online, I'm afraid, is going to be quite small, even less than the 3% that I mentioned earlier about what they'd save.
That's a good question. Ties into something that was discussed yesterday on the legislation that mandated the capability and capacity to do 200 remains a year. Also mandated a case file on everyone that's missing. Now we have those case files for Vietnam, we have for Korea, but we don't have one for World War II. And what we're doing is the individual deceased personnel file, IDPS, and some of you are familiar with that. There's IDPS on your level. That's where our basis is starting for World War II. And there's 400 and some thousand IDPS at NAR. I believe it's at Suitland. I believe it's Suitland. We're in the process, DKMO is in the process of scanning all those in. We're only interested in about 78,000, but we can't pull out the 78,000, so we're going to scan all of them in. And that's going to be the basis for the World War II files. We're up to about 20,000, I believe. Now, JPAC is kicked in too. It's very expensive, as Tim mentioned. It's extremely expensive. And we're running out of money, and JPAC has been helping us out with that. So that's for World War II, but that's an effort that we're making. And it is very time consuming. We have a whole team doing it. They've got to prepare the documents, and you can't, I mean, have a quality document scanned in. It's a lot of prep work that goes into it. Next question.
I've seen that the LDS has taken microfiche, and now they have new technology where they're digitizing 100 frames in half an hour, less than 45 minutes. Why aren't they working hand in hand to see if possibly there's, a way of doing that?
Yes, ma'am. It's not the scanning so much as the preparation. It's the preparation.
No, I'm talking about microfiche films that are done. Yeah. They have the technology now, I know, because now it's already uploaded onto online where you can go down to already look at all these do all kinds of work. I know when I went to the library in Santa Clara County, the whole section was out because they were digitizing it or microfilming it. First, well, at that time it was microfilm, now it's digitizing. And they do those things.
And who's doing this?
Yeah, yes. Come on.
Oh,
Okay.
oh.
Yeah, I mean, they do it. They can do it efficiently, you know. So if it's on a microfilm and they digitize it in half an hour or something like that because they have the technology, then maybe that's something that should be considered.
You're right. One problem with that, ma'am, is when Lee goes and gets the morning report, we're only interested in the casualties that we're looking for. So we want maybe day before, the day of the loss, the day after, and then 30 days later, the person drops on the roll. We're not looking to take every morning report that's created in Korea by every company, primary crew size.
But for research in the future or anybody else here who, you're getting one person to do 8,000, can you visualize each person doing a one-on-one accelerated search? That's all I'm saying.
Give me address, they have to go out there.
Thank you.
I was told in April by the Army Casualty Office that there were 4 records in existence at NARA on my father. 2 of those records have been checked out, but NARA will not tell the Army Casualty Office who checked them out or when.
Yes, I can answer that. The reason why they're checked out is probably to add current material to it. Many times in the NARA facility in St. Louis, records are sent all over the building to reconstructionists, people that are working, anti-mold people. So it stays in our hands for quite some time. And then when it comes back, I look through the database. If the record's not checked out, and if there's a request, then I'll collect the record.
Why don't we get with the afterwards then?
Pardon me?
Let's get with you afterwards too, just to make sure, because we can get down the documents and find out.
With respect to records that have been accessioned into the National Archives, at least at the National Archives at College Park, once they're accessioned into the National Archives of the United States, they're in the legal custody of the archivist. They're no longer in the legal custody of the creating agency. And we do not lend records back to agencies. If an agency wants to look at an accession record, they have to send somebody out to College Park and look at them and make copies and do whatever they want to, but they have to do it on site at our facility.
I don't have a question, I have a comment. A few years ago, my relative was unknown. Started to ramble, but I don't know what I say. But what I did and found out more information than is coming to these conferences is I went on the website to Marine Corps Battalion that he was assigned to, which was Charlie Company, First Battalion, 7th Marines, First Market. I contacted those folks through the website. I actually got a phone call from the person who was with him, who told me how he died, when he died, and where he died. So I just put that out to you. If you go into the unit that your relative was attached to, you might find out some more information. Thank you.
Thank you. Got time for one more question? All right, we're going to break for lunch. If not, Dr. Andrew, you guys stick around? You can be around. If you have any specific questions for Dr. Messenger or Lee Manning, we're going to be here, and the rest of you, we're going to break for lunch. We're going to be back at 1:30. Oh, sorry, what? Excuse me. Just what one last question, just Joe, this got a question.
I was in Korea. I got there in 51, 52 when I was home before the war ended. I was not there when the Chinese came across the border and they were slaughtered by the thousands by Americans. I talked to guys that machine guns and they just mowed the Chinese down. Also, I talked to some, I just want you to know, Lord, in the game. I talked to some Marines who, when the Chinese surrounded them, they blew up the bridges, so they had to fight their way back to the coast to be taken away from the enemy. And the Chinese blew up all the bridges. It was so cold at that time, the Americans and the Chinese did not have enough clothing. Many froze to death. Okay, and blowing up the bridges, the Americans had to fly in bridges from Japan. They didn't have wood to shore up bridges. They shored up these bridges with dead Chinese bodies. This is what war is like. And I don't know if I was over there too. I don't know if I would have wanted my body brought back or not. I'm perplexed. I've talked to show you what war is like. I had a friend over in Germany, and he told me this himself, that there was a captain in the German army, and this guy had a warm coat. He was a